She's too pretty to be real military." Congressman Daniel Mercer said it loud enough to turn heads 3 tables over. The laugh that followed rolled across the steakhouse like a bowling ball. Big politician laugh, practiced, confident, the kind that expected everybody else to join in. And most of them did. Then one of Mercer's security men leaned down and whispered something in his ear. I watched the smile leave his face so fast it honestly scared me a little. Not embarrassment, fear. The man looked at me like he'd just spotted a landmine 2 inches from his boot. That was the moment I should have gotten up and left. Truth is, I almost hadn't gone there at all. 3 days earlier, my old commanding officer, Colonel Ben Foster, called me while I was hosing saltwater off a used Boston whaler behind the marina in Wilmington. "Rachel," he said, "I need a favor." I remember holding the phone between my shoulder and ear while fighting with a busted hose nozzle that kept spraying my jeans. "You only call when you need something." That obvious? "Ben, I'm 52 years old. I sell fishing boats to retired dentists now. Whatever this is, I'm probably not the person. It's one dinner." That should have been my warning right there. Nothing in Washington was ever just one dinner. But he kept pushing. A veterans fundraiser in Arlington, a few former military personnel needed at the tables. Somebody canceled last minute. Optics mattered. I hated that word, optics. Still, Ben had covered my back overseas more than once, so I said yes. By Thursday evening, I was sitting inside one of those upscale DC steakhouses where every man over 60 somehow looked exactly the same. Navy blazer, expensive watch, teeth too white. The place smelled like bourbon cigar smoke and burned butter. Servers moved around carrying giant ribeyes on black trays, while old political donors talked about patriotism between bites of $40 mashed potatoes. Meanwhile, all I could think about was Kabul. Funny how memory works like that. One smell can drag you backward 10 years before you even realize it happened. The sizzling meat reminded me of diesel heat rolling off armored vehicles under Afghan sun. The low hum of voices reminded me of command tents at night. Even the sharp scent of whiskey dragged up old memories of JP-8 fuel and dust storms. I sat quietly near the end of the table wishing I'd stayed home in North Carolina. My lower back already hurt from the flight up. Arthritis was acting up in my hands because rain had moved into the area that afternoon. I kept rubbing my thumb joint under the table, hoping nobody noticed. Then Mercer started performing. That's the only word for it. Performing. He had that politician energy where every story somehow circled back to himself. Former college football player, cable news regular, loud handshake guy, probably practiced smiling in mirrors. People loved him. Or pretended to. At first, his jokes were harmless enough. Little comments about Pentagon waste, expensive military contracts, DC traffic. Then he started talking about women in the armed forces. I'm just saying he laughed, cutting into his steak. Half these recruitment ads look like perfume commercials now. A few men chuckled. I took a sip of iced tea and kept quiet. Then his eyes landed on me. He pointed his fork slightly in my direction. "No offense, ma'am," he said, grinning, "but she looks more like Fox News weather than military." More laughter. Not huge this time, nervous laughter. The kind people use when they aren't sure whether they should. I looked down at my hands instead of his face. Funny thing about getting older, you stop caring what strangers think about your looks, but disrespect still lands hard. Especially from people who never carried anything heavier than a camera crew. The skin across my knuckles was rough from years around boats and docks. Small white scars crossed 2 fingers from work overseas long before that. Those hands had done things men like Mercer only watched in movies. And for a second I almost said that out loud. But I didn't. Because at my age you learn silence can keep situations from getting uglier. Then the security guy leaned down beside Mercer. Gray-haired man, former military probably. You can spot it in posture alone. He whispered directly into Mercer's ear. I saw Mercer blink once. Then twice. His face lost all color. The room kept moving around us, silverware clinking, waitresses, walking donors laughing, but something had changed instantly at that table. Mercer stared at me now like he knew me. Not socially. Personally. Excuse me, he said abruptly. He stood so quickly his chair scraped across the floor. A few people looked confused. Mercer walked around the table toward me, suddenly not smiling anymore. Captain Morgan, he said quietly. Would you mind speaking privately for a moment? That got everybody's attention. I hadn't used that title in years. I followed him because honestly, now I wanted answers too. He led me down a side hallway near the kitchen entrance where cooks shouted over sizzling grills. Up close, he looked older than television made him appear, tired around the eyes, sweat forming near his hairline. For a few seconds, he just stared at me. Then he lowered his voice. I didn't realize who you were. Clearly. That comment back there was inappropriate. You've probably said worse. He ignored that. Instead, he asked, have you spoken to anybody recently about Kabul? That hit me like cold water. Not because of the question itself. Because of how fast he asked it. Like he'd been waiting years for the wrong person to remember something. I crossed my arms. Why would I? Mercer glanced toward the dining room before speaking again. Some things from that time were complicated. Funny word choice. You know how those operations worked? I watched him carefully then. Not the congressman version. The real man underneath. And for the first time all night I realized Daniel Mercer wasn't worried about embarrassment. He was worried about exposure. Before walking away, he stopped beside the kitchen doors and looked back at me. We both know some things are better left buried, Captain Morgan. Then he went right back into the dining room, smiling for cameras like nothing happened. I left 10 minutes later. Outside, rain hammered DC hard enough to blur headlights across the windshield while I drove toward my hotel in Alexandria. Twice I checked my rearview mirror because an SUV seemed to stay behind me too long. By midnight, I was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed eating stale peanut M&Ms from the minibar with CNN playing muted in the background. That's when my phone rang. Blocked number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. A man's voice said quietly, "Don't dig too deep." Then the line went dead. I sat there listening to the empty silence afterward longer than I probably should have. Because deep down I already knew something terrible had just started. I barely slept that night. Every time I started drifting off, I saw Mercer's face again. Not the fake smiling version from television. The hallway version, pale, tight around the eyes, like a man hearing footsteps behind him in the dark. By 4:30 in the morning, I gave up completely. I threw on jeans, drove down Route 1, and ended up at a Waffle House outside Alexandria, packed with truckers and exhausted airport workers. There's something comforting about Waffle House at dawn. Nobody's pretending to be important in there. The waitress called everybody honey. The coffee tasted burnt. A cook in the back argued with somebody about SEC football while country music played too quietly to fully hear. Real America. I sat in a booth rubbing at the pressure building behind my left eye. Migraine. I'd gotten them ever since Afghanistan. Stress usually triggered them, lack of sleep too. The waitress topped off my coffee. You okay, sweetheart? You look tired. Feel about 90 years old, I told her. She laughed. That's everybody before sunrise. I smiled a little at that. Then I picked up my phone and called Carla Ruiz. If there was one person on earth who understood how Washington people operated behind closed doors, it was Carla. We'd met overseas years ago when she worked State Department communications during one of the worst stretches of the war. Smart as hell, sharp tongue, divorced twice and proud of surviving both men. She answered on the third ring, sounding fully awake already. Well, she said either somebody died or you're finally dating again. Neither. That bad, huh? I told her about the dinner. The joke, the security guard, Mercer pulling me aside. I even repeated his exact words. Some things are better left buried. Carla went quiet for a second. Then she said, Rachel, politicians don't panic because they said something rude. I stared out the diner window at trucks rolling through rain. They panic because somebody in the room knows where the bodies are buried. That sentence settled in my stomach hard. I stirred cold cream into my coffee even though I'd already forgotten adding it. You think this has something to do with Kabul? I think Mercer wouldn't remember one army captain from 10 years ago unless there was a reason. That was the thing bothering me too. Men like Mercer met thousands of military personnel every year. We blurred together after a while, names, faces, handshakes. But he remembered me. Or worse. He remembered what I knew. After we hung up, I sat there another 20 minutes trying not to think about Kabul. Didn't work. Memory doesn't care what you want. By noon, I was driving south toward North Carolina through sheets of cold rain with old memories crawling out of places I'd shoved them years ago. The convoy. The warning memo. The interpreter. God. Farid Rahmani. I hadn't thought about him in a long time. That realization alone made guilt creep up my throat. Farid worked alongside our unit during Mercer's congressional visit overseas. Smart guy, mid-40s maybe, dry sense of humor. Spoke English better than half the contractors around us. And he'd been nervous before that convoy left. I remembered that suddenly. Really remembered it. The way he kept smoking cigarettes too fast outside the motor pool. The way he quietly told me, something about this route feels wrong. At the time, intelligence reports had already flagged possible insurgent movement near Highway 1. I submitted concerns upward. Nothing happened. Convoy rolled anyway. 2 Americans died in the blast. Farid disappeared afterward. Officially, the report called him missing. But overseas missing usually meant dead. By late afternoon, I pulled into Raleigh to visit Walter Grady. Everybody called him Walt. Retired Army Sergeant, Vietnam first, Afghanistan contractor later. Walt lived alone outside town in a weathered little house behind an old machine shop littered with rusted signs and engine parts. Country radio crackled softly through the open garage while he worked metal with thick, scarred hands. He looked up when I walked in. Well, he grunted, "You look miserable." "Nice seeing you, too." "That means something's wrong." We sat outside under a tin awning while rain hammered the yard around us. Walt listened without interrupting while I explained the Mercer situation. When I finished, he leaned back slowly in his chair. "You need to let this alone." "That's what everybody keeps saying." "Because they're right." I rubbed my temples. "You know something?" He sighed heavily before answering. A former contractor tried reopening questions about that convoy about 6 years ago. I looked at him sharply. "What happened?" "Single-car accident outside Richmond." "You think it was connected?" "I think healthy men don't usually drive straight into bridge supports at 2 in the afternoon." The rain sounded louder after that. Walt stared out into the yard a while before speaking again. "You've got a grandson still young enough to hug you when you walk through the door." I smiled faintly at that because he was right. Noah still did that every time I came home. "Don't trade your future for ghosts," Walt said quietly. The thing was, part of me wanted permission to quit. I really did. I had a decent life now. Not glamorous, but peaceful. Morning coffee on the dock, customers arguing over fishing electronics, watching pelicans dive near the marina, helping Noah with algebra homework while complaining about modern music together. I'd earned that peace. Hadn't I? By the time I finally reached Wilmington that evening, my nerves were shot. The marina parking lot sat mostly empty except for a few charter boats rocking against wet docks under gray skies. I unlocked my truck and froze immediately. The glove compartment hung slightly open. Tiny thing. Most people wouldn't notice. But I noticed. I checked the back seat. Nothing gone. Then I drove home faster than I should have. The moment I stepped inside my house, something felt wrong there too. Not obvious. Subtle. Kitchen chair angled differently. Hall closet cracked open. Back door unlocked. Every instinct I learned overseas woke up at once. I grabbed the old Louisville Slugger beside the laundry room before checking every room in the house. Nobody there. But somebody had been. I finally found it in my bedroom closet. The old steel lockbox where I kept military keepsakes sat open on the floor. Pictures, challenge coins, old commendations. Gone. My stomach tightened. Then I noticed what had been left behind. A congressional lapel pin. Gold eagle design. Daniel Mercer's initials engraved inside. Not theft. Not random. A message. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed staring at that pin while rain tapped against the windows. And for the first time in years, one memory came back clear enough to make my chest tighten. I wasn't just there during that convoy. I may have been the last American still alive who knew why that route got chosen in the first place. For the next 3 days, I turned into one of those people who kept checking mirrors without realizing it. I'd look up while driving and suddenly notice I'd already checked the rear view 3 times in under a minute. Black SUV behind me. Heart jumps. Man standing too long near the marina office. Heart jumps again. Maybe it sounds paranoid. Maybe it was paranoid. But once somebody breaks into your home and leaves a message instead of taking valuables, your brain stops working normally for a while. That Thursday morning I was standing beside Doc C trying to explain fish finder systems to a retired dentist from Charlotte when my migraine started coming back. The sunlight bouncing off the water didn't help. I pressed 2 fingers against my temple while the customer talked non-stop about striped bass fishing. "You all right there, Miss Rachel?" "Just tired." That was easier than explaining 10 years of buried memories crawling back up all at once. By lunchtime, my daughter Melissa showed up unexpectedly at the marina carrying iced coffees. She knew something was wrong immediately. Mothers never stop reading their kids. Turns out daughters don't stop reading their mothers either. "You look awful," she said. "Thank you, sweetheart." "I'm serious." We sat outside near the bait freezer while gulls screamed overhead. Melissa was 32, nurse at New Hanover Regional, divorced, stronger than she realized. She handed me coffee and narrowed her eyes. What happened? I should have lied. Instead, I told her enough truth to make a mistake. Not everything. Just enough. Her expression changed halfway through. Not confusion. Fear. "Mom," she said quietly, "why are you even near these people again?" "I didn't plan this." "But now you are." I stared out toward the water. Fishing boats rocked gently against the dock while diesel fumes drifted through the air. Everything looked normal. That almost made it worse. Melissa lowered her voice. "You already lost enough people over there." I didn't answer. Then she said the sentence that finally hit where it hurt. "Don't make Noah lose his grandmother, too." That one stayed with me all day. That night I barely slept again. At 2 in the morning I got up, walked barefoot into the kitchen and stood there drinking tap water while the house creaked around me. Old homes always sound alive after midnight. Air vents ticking, floorboards settling, refrigerator humming. I remember looking out the window toward the dark street and thinking, this is ridiculous. You're 52 years old acting like somebody's outside with binoculars. Then headlights slowed briefly near the curb before moving on. And suddenly I didn't feel ridiculous anymore. The next afternoon Carla called. "I found somebody you need to speak with." "Who?" "Farid Rahmani's daughter." That stopped me cold. I leaned against the marina counter. "She's alive." Rachel Carla said carefully the daughter was never the question. "Right. Of course." I rubbed my forehead hard. "Where is she?" "Columbus, Ohio." 2 days later I flew there. Cheap Southwest flight, terrible coffee, crying baby 4 rows back. The entire time I kept asking myself why I was doing this. Maybe guilt finally gets tired of waiting quietly. That nursing home Layla worked at sat outside Columbus near a stretch of gray suburban roads, lined with pharmacies and chain restaurants. Cold wind hit me hard crossing the parking lot. Inside smelled like disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. I spotted Layla immediately from the photo Carla sent me. Dark hair tied back, blue scrubs, calm face. She looked tired in the way caretakers always look tired. But she also looked steady. Strong. When she saw me approach, she already knew who I was. Captain Morgan. Hearing that title again still felt strange. I haven't used that name in a long time. "My father spoke highly of you." That hit harder than I expected. We sat in a small break room drinking terrible vending machine coffee while snow drifted outside the windows. Layla didn't cry. Didn't raise her voice. That almost made everything sadder somehow. "I don't hate soldiers," she told me quietly. "Most of them were kind to my father." She looked down briefly before continuing. "I hate men who use wars to become important." I didn't know what to say to that because she wasn't wrong. Then she asked me something I'd secretly feared for 10 years. Did my father know the convoy was dangerous? I closed my eyes for a second. Yes. Did your people know too? That one took longer. Finally I nodded. Some of us did. Layla sat very still after that. Not angry. Just disappointed in a way that felt much worse. Then she reached into her purse and slid an envelope across the table. Inside was an old printed photograph. The convoy staging area before departure. I stared at it in disbelief. How did you get this? You sent it to my father years ago after the attack. Suddenly I remembered. God. I had forgotten completely. Back then, I'd emailed several photos to Fareed while trying to help gather records for compensation claims, which meant Mercer's people breaking into my house accomplished absolutely nothing. Then I looked closer at the photo. And there he was, Daniel Mercer, standing beside local contractor Hamid Barak. Both smiling, both shaking hands. I felt cold all over. Because memory finally connected something I'd tried not to think about for years. The contractor had pushed aggressively for that convoy route. And before departure, I'd seen Mercer alone with him near the airfield trailers. Not talking politics. Talking business. At the time, I ignored it because everybody ignored things overseas. Contractors handing out favors wasn't unusual. But now it looked different. Layla watched my face carefully. You remember something? I nodded slowly. Then I told her the truth I'd spent 10 years avoiding. I should have spoken up after the attack. You were military. Could you have changed anything? That's the problem, I admitted quietly. I don't know. That was the truth nobody likes saying out loud. Maybe I could have pushed harder, maybe not. But I'd stayed silent because I was exhausted and wanted out. I'd told myself surviving was enough. Funny how conscience waits patiently. That evening after I returned to my hotel, my phone rang. Unknown number again. I almost ignored it. Almost. Rachel Mercer said calmly. No introduction, no pretending. What do you want? To help you. I laughed once at that. You broke into my house. You can't prove that. There it was. The real man again. Mercer spoke softly, professionally, like somebody negotiating property taxes. He offered $200,000. Help for Melissa, college support for Noah, connections. For one dangerous moment, I actually pictured it. Mortgage gone, Melissa breathing easier, Noah graduating debt-free. Then Mercer made the mistake. You need to understand, he said people like that interpreter were collateral damage in a complicated situation. People like that. I felt something inside me finally harden. Not rage exactly. Clarity. After hanging up, I opened an old backup phone I hadn't touched in years. The battery barely worked. Inside the photo folder sat a digital copy of the convoy image. And this time when I zoomed in close enough, I noticed something I'd missed before. Mercer wasn't just beside the contractor. The contractor was handing him an envelope. And both men were smiling like old friends. That was the moment I realized Daniel Mercer wasn't trying to bury one bad memory. He was trying to protect something much bigger. By the time Mercer's charity gala rolled around, I was running almost entirely on caffeine and stubbornness. Mostly caffeine. I drove up to Washington the morning of the event with a travel mug full of bad gas station coffee sitting in the cup holder and an old Fleetwood Mac song crackling through my truck speakers. Rain followed me most of the way up Interstate 95. Felt fitting somehow. Every few miles I checked the mirror again. Dark SUV behind me too long, license plate familiar. Nothing concrete. That was the worst part. Fear gets exhausting when you can't prove it belongs there. I reached Arlington around 3 in the afternoon and checked into a Marriott that smelled faintly like carpet cleaner and stale air conditioning. Carla was already waiting in the lobby bar. The moment she saw me, she frowned. You look terrible. Apparently that's everybody's opening line lately. I'm serious, Rachel. I knew what she meant. The last week had worn me down hard. I hadn't slept right in days. My migraine medicine barely touched the pressure behind my eyes anymore. My shoulders stayed tight all the time, like my body expected something bad to happen every minute. Carla slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots, timeline notes, contractor records, copies of the old route warning memo, and still images pulled from the convoy photograph. Everything set, I asked. Mostly. Mostly isn't comforting. That's Washington. I snorted quietly at that. The gala itself started at 7 inside one of those giant downtown hotel ballrooms built specifically for rich people to congratulate each other. Huge American flags, blue stage lighting, military orchestra music playing softly overhead. You could practically smell donor money in the air. Veterans in dress uniforms mingled beside lobbyists and political staffers carrying cocktails. Waitresses floated through the room with trays of shrimp and bourbon glasses. And there was Mercer, standing near the stage laughing like the last 10 years of his life had been perfectly clean. For a second, I almost lost my nerve. Not because I doubted the truth, because I suddenly understood how powerful public image really is. People didn't see Daniel Mercer. They saw Patriot Leader TV personality fundraiser. They saw the version professionally built for them. Meanwhile, I was just an aging former Army captain with migraines and marina receipts in her purse. One accusation from me against a congressman. That could get ugly fast. Carla leaned closer. You all right? I think I'm about to throw up. Good, means you still understand consequences. I laughed despite myself. Then I noticed something that nearly broke the tension completely. Small white stickers had started appearing on cocktail tables around the ballroom. Tiny little printed labels. Congressman Maybelline. I stared at one. Then another. Then spotted a retired Marine trying unsuccessfully not to laugh into his whiskey. Please tell me you didn't do that, I muttered. Carla smiled innocently. No idea what you're talking about. Dark humor. Veteran humor. Honestly, it helped. At 7:30, Mercer stepped on stage to applause. Big smile. Perfect tie. American flag pin shining under ballroom lights. I'm proud to stand before the brave men and women. Carla squeezed my arm suddenly. Wait. I looked toward the AV booth. One of the tech screens had gone black. My stomach dropped. No, Carla muttered. No. The video. Layla's recording. The ballroom staff scrambled while Mercer kept speaking smoothly on stage, unaware anything was wrong. I felt panic hit my chest instantly. This couldn't fail, not now. A young technician cursed under his breath while smacking keys. System froze, he whispered. Mercer continued talking about sacrifice and honor, while my pulse hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. For one horrible moment I thought maybe this was over before it started. Then the screen flickered. Static. A loud squeal from the speakers cut through the ballroom. Mercer paused mid-sentence. And suddenly Layla Rahmani appeared 20 feet tall behind him. The room went silent almost immediately. She sat in a plain chair wearing blue nursing scrubs, hands folded calmly in her lap. No dramatic music, no angry performance. Just a tired woman speaking plainly. My father worked beside American soldiers for many years, she said quietly. He believed loyalty mattered. Even Mercer turned around slowly toward the screen. Layla described the convoy, the warnings ignored, her father disappearing after the explosion. No yelling. That made it land harder somehow. You could hear ice shifting inside whiskey glasses around the ballroom. Then came the photo. Mercer beside contractor Hamid Barak. Murmurs spread instantly through the crowd. Mercer's expression tightened, but he recovered fast. Professional politician instincts. He stepped toward the microphone, smiling carefully. Ladies and gentlemen, he said smoothly, I believe we may be witnessing a misunderstanding rooted in trauma and incomplete records. That was my moment. And suddenly my legs didn't want to move. I stayed frozen beside the ballroom wall while every bad outcome hit me at once. What if nobody believes you? What if Melissa was right? What if Noah ends up watching this online someday? Carla leaned close enough for only me to hear. You're not doing this because you hate him, she whispered. You're doing it because you hate what staying quiet did to you. That one cut straight through. I walked toward the stage before I could change my mind. A few people recognized me from the fundraiser dinner immediately. Whispers started. Mercer saw me approaching and the look in his eyes changed completely. Not fear this time. Warning. I took the microphone with a shaking hand. My name is Rachel Morgan, I said. Former Army intelligence. The room stayed dead silent. I explained the convoy warning memo, the unsafe route concerns, the contractor connections, the pressure afterward to let it disappear quietly. No speeches, no theatrics. Just facts. Mercer waited until I finished before stepping closer beside me. Calm, controlled, dangerous. Captain Morgan has clearly carried painful memories for many years, he said gently to the crowd. But memory under trauma can become unreliable. That almost worked too. I could feel uncertainty moving through the room. Then somebody stood up near the back. The security contractor from the steakhouse. Gray-haired, broad shoulders, nervous as hell. Every eye turned toward him. I destroyed operational documents, he said quietly. Mercer's face drained instantly. The man swallowed hard before continuing. I was ordered to. Gasps spread around the ballroom. But I can't say more than that. And somehow that made the whole thing feel even more real. Mercer stared at me with pure hatred now. As people raised phones around the room recording everything, he stepped close enough for only me to hear. You're making a very big mistake. For the first time all night, I didn't feel afraid anymore. No, I told him quietly. I made the mistake 10 years ago when I stayed silent. Around us, donors whispered. Veterans walked toward exits. Political staffers panicked near the walls. And standing under those giant ballroom lights, Daniel Mercer finally looked exactly what he was. Not powerful. Just exposed. People always imagine moments like that ending with handcuffs. That's television. Real life usually ends with lawyers. 3 days after the gala, every cable news channel in America seemed to be running some version of Daniel Mercer's face, beside words like allegations, ethics concerns, and misconduct investigation. Nobody said corruption directly at first. Washington people are careful with language when powerful men are involved. Still, the damage spread fast. The convoy photo leaked online, then the fundraiser footage. Then clips of Mercer confronting me started circulating everywhere. Especially the Congressman Maybelline stickers. That part took on a life of its own. Somebody even made t-shirts. I'll admit it, the first time Carla texted me a picture of a middle-aged guy wearing one outside a Capitol Hill protest, I laughed so hard coffee came out my nose. And after weeks of fear and migraines and barely sleeping, that laugh felt good. For about 5 seconds. Then reality settled back in. Because Daniel Mercer still wasn't going to prison. Instead, his attorneys went into full damage control mode. Official statements, selective denials, words like politically motivated and distorted narratives. But little by little, the walls still started closing around him. The House Ethics Committee announced a formal review. Major donors quietly disappeared. Mercer lost his chairmanship on the Armed Services Oversight Subcommittee within 2 weeks. Then, party leadership removed him from re-election planning altogether. Publicly, they blamed health concerns. Nobody believed that. Back home in Wilmington, life got strange fast. Customers at the marina recognized me now. Some treated me like a hero. Others stared too long without saying anything. One older man buying bait grabbed my arm near the register and whispered, "You did the right thing." Then he walked out before I could answer. Another guy accused me of trying to ruin a patriot. Honestly, that one bothered me less. When people build their identity around powerful men, truth feels personal to them. That isn't new in America. Melissa hated all of it. One evening, she came over after work still wearing scrubs and found me sitting at the kitchen table sorting bills. "You're famous now," she said flatly. "God forbid." "I'm serious." "So am I." She dropped her purse onto the counter harder than necessary. "You think this is over?" "Number." "Then why are you acting calm?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because I already spent 10 years afraid. That shut both of us up for a minute. Noah wandered in halfway through carrying a bag of microwave popcorn. "What are you guys fighting about?" "Politics," I said. He groaned dramatically. "Old people stuff." That made Melissa laugh despite herself. And hearing her laugh again after the last few weeks nearly broke my heart. A few days later, I found the black rose. It sat alone on my front porch early Sunday morning. No card, no delivery tag. Just one black rose laid carefully beside a photograph. My family. Recent, too. Melissa and Noah outside the marina maybe 2 weeks earlier. My stomach went cold instantly. I checked the street, the neighbors' yards, nothing. The old fear came back hard after that. For 2 straight nights, I barely slept again. Every sound outside made me look toward windows. Truck doors shutting, dogs barking, headlights crossing curtains. I even caught myself reaching for the old baseball bat beside my bed like I was back overseas reaching for a rifle. That scared me more than the flower did. Because I realized how easy it is for fear to become habit again. Carla wanted me to go public about the threat immediately. Walt wanted me to buy a firearm. Melissa wanted me to disappear somewhere for a while. Instead, I went to work Monday morning. That probably sounds stubborn. Maybe it was. But I'd spent too many years letting powerful people quietly decide how much space everybody else was allowed to take up. I was done shrinking. About a month after the gala, the Veterans Memorial Foundation held a small ceremony outside Richmond, honoring interpreters and local allies killed during the war. Farid Rahmani's name was included officially for the first time. No television cameras. No politicians speaking. Just folding chairs, cold wind, and families standing quietly beside memorial walls. Layla came down from Ohio for it. We stood together near the back afterward while people slowly drifted away toward parked cars. "You gave my father his name back," she told me softly. I shook my head. "No, I should have done this years ago." Layla looked at me carefully for a second. "Maybe," she said, "but you still did it." That sentence stayed with me. Because the older you get, the more you realize life rarely gives perfect timing. Sometimes all you get is one final chance to stop lying to yourself. Winter settled in slowly after that. Tourist season faded around Wilmington. The marina got quieter. Cold air rolled off the Cape Fear River every morning. And little by little normal life returned. Not fully. I don't think it ever fully does after something like that. But enough. Enough for peace to start finding its way back. One Saturday morning near Christmas, Noah and I sat together beside the river before sunrise eating sausage biscuits from a gas station while fishing boats rocked against the docks. The world felt calm again for the first time in months. My old pickup truck sat nearby with the AM radio playing softly through static. Noah sipped hot chocolate and finally asked the question I'd known was coming. "So why was that congressman so scared of you?" I looked out across the dark water a while before answering. Cold wind pushed against the dock pilings with slow, hollow sounds. "He wasn't scared because I was strong," I told him. "Then why?" I thought about Mercer, about Kabul, about all the years I stayed quiet because silence felt safer. Then I looked at my grandson. He was scared because I stopped caring whether people like him approved of me anymore. Noah nodded slowly like he understood more than I expected him to. Maybe he did. Kids notice things adults miss. The sun finally started coming up over the river, then turning the water pale gold. And sitting there beside my grandson with cheap coffee warming my hands, I realized something surprising. Revenge hadn't really been the point after all.